Welcome to Hey Chaplain. My name is Jared Altick, and I'm a chaplain with the police department. Hey Chaplain is the officer wellness podcast, which brings you expertise and wisdom from police officers around the world. Today, I'm giving you part 2 of our conversation with Ken Anderson, a medically retired police officer from the UK, who in the previous episode told us about his story of attempting to take his own life. If you haven't listened to part 1, then you have my permission right now to pause this episode, go back, listen to part 1. That's episode 106, and then return here to hear the continuation of our conversation. I'm actually going to start this episode with an excerpt from before, describing the life-saving encounter that Ken had on a sea cliff in England. This episode makes several references to struggles with depression and suicidal thoughts. Listener discretion is advised. Previously on the Hey Chaplain podcast.
And my mental health just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I couldn't explain it at the time. I didn't know what was going on. I felt incredibly isolated and alone. And then one day, I was up quite late and just started researching suicide hotspots. I set off on this hour-long drive, crying constantly, uncontrollably crying, just could not stop crying. And I knew what I was going to do when I got there. And part of my head was saying, stop, put your foot on the brake, turn around, no good is going to come of this. You've got to stop yourself. But I physically could not stop myself from keeping on going.
The place that you picked was where?
It was out at the coast. It was a nature reserve. And I remember finding this secluded little viewing point because I didn't want anyone around me. I didn't want anyone there. And I must have been there hours just crying and crying and crying. And thoughts running through my head about what I was doing, what I was about to do. And the hatred of self was that powerful that it convinced me at the time that the most loving thing that I could do would be to not be there anymore. And I eventually made the decision to go over the railing. I was 100% convinced it was the right decision, what I was about to do.
Then what stopped you?
Unbeknownst to me at the time, just as I was starting to climb over this wooden railing, there was an old woman behind me that I didn't know was there. And it sounds incredibly corny and cheesy, but she just said, "Are you okay?" I remember sort of like shaking my head as if to say, "No, I'm not okay." And then I think she asked if I wanted to go for a cup of tea. How English is that? Do you want a cup of tea? Go for a cup of tea or something like that. And I think I shook my head, and she just stayed there. She didn't really say anything, but she just stayed there. And then after that, the police were involved. They'd obviously been called, and the mental health crisis team were called, and things kind of like escalated from there. And that was basically what I refer to as my Phoenix Rising moment, because that was my absolute rock bottom, ready to go. I didn't, and after that I started a road to recovery.
It sounds like her question, "Are you okay?" kind of hit a reset button or something in you. Why you were so resolved to take your life? Why do you think her question changed that?
I think that it wasn't so much the question itself. Apparently, when someone's intent on doing something, like taking their own life, there is a really small window of, it's something like 7 seconds or whatever, where if you interject or you can snap them out of it in that 7 seconds, the chances of them not doing it increase dramatically.
Right.
And it wasn't so much what she'd said, it was the fact that she was there, and I still had this, and I still do now, this innate calling to protect other people. And I wanted to protect her from what I was about to do. It's a deeply personal thing for me that I was about to do. And I didn't want to distress her with it. So I thought, I'll just take a step, I'll hold on a bit, she'll go, and then I'll be able to get back to it, in effect. But that didn't happen.
Once the moment was gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because she was a stubborn old dear, and she just refused to go. But I have absolutely no idea who she is. I wish I knew who she was so that I could see her now and say thank you. She probably has no idea what she stopped or prevented that day. Just those 3 words of, are you okay? It wasn't just the question. It was everything that encompassed that reaching in.
Yeah.
When I was at rock bottom, reaching in. And that's one of the things that I now try and work with when I try and help other people, is there is far too much emphasis on people that are struggling having to speak up, reach out. Oh, if you're feeling down and you need anything, just give me a call. It is incredibly hard to reach out. Yeah. It is so much easier for people to reach in and to actually check, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. No, how are you really? Well, actually, I'm not that great. After my attempt at suicide, my sergeant, but the new sergeant, not the other one, he was brilliant at contacting me, and he stayed in regular contact all the time. But the negative side of things was that he told the rest of my team, don't pester me. He's going through a rough time, can't talk about it, can't disclose it, but just make sure to give him some space, and if there's any updates, I'll let you know. What that then meant was that people didn't check in on me, didn't message. And so the whole time that I was off, I was thinking that no one cared. No one valued me. No one thought anything of me. And then in December, I went on a Christmas do with my old team, and it was the first time that I'd seen them in 18 months or whatever.
Yeah.
Since being off work. Almost 2 years, in fact. And none of them knew what had happened.
Oh, wow.
And so I'd spent 2 years being at home, thinking that no one cared, that everybody knew what I was going through, everybody knew that I'd had this suicide attempt, all this kind of stuff, and no one was bothered. When in truth, they weren't told anything, they weren't updated, they weren't kept in the loop, and it's not. They were
actually discouraged from contacting you.
Yeah.
I
know that my sergeant at the time was doing what they felt was best, and data protection, and looking out for my welfare and all this sort of making sure that I wasn't overwhelmed or swamped or reminded of work.
Protect your privacy.
Yeah. But I think that it could have been handled better.
It sounds like you're on a mission now to provide what you did not have as an officer.
Yeah. I feel like, from my experience, when things were first starting to get on top, because it was never the big trauma, it was never the dead bodies or the assaults or whatever it was never the big things. I was trained for that. I was paid to deal with that. I had colleagues around me that I could discuss those things with after. So they were fine. They were compartmentalized and dealt with. It was the little things, the argument with your partner on a Sunday night before you start on Monday, and your head's just not in the game because of that. Your car goes in to the garage, and all of a sudden it needs 2 new tires that you weren't planning. So that's an extra £300. Where am I going to get that from? I don't get paid. It's all those little things that started adding up and really starting to play on me more than the work side of things. And if I'd have been able to just speak more freely and openly with people, if I'd have felt like it was a safer environment to be able to discuss a lot of things, that there wasn't so much stigma around manning up and all this kind of stuff, that would have helped me release that little tap, that little valve of my stresses and my concerns. And I genuinely believe it would have made a difference long term in how I was able to deal with things and process things. And so what I try and do now is take the skills that I've learned in policing, communication, critical thinking, crisis management, problem solving, all of these skills, and impart that knowledge in the workplace, not just with men, but with everyone. It's okay to talk, but reach in on people as well. Get them talking. Understand that people do have their little things, and they might have a smiley face on the outside, but there's probably stuff going on the inside as well. So just encourage a good, diverse culture where you can talk about different things. That's the mission that I'm on now. It's not about some mental health crusade or anything like that. I'll leave that to the paid professionals, okay? The people that have been to university and they've got their diplomas and the doctorates and all this, they can deal with that side of things. I'm trying to get people talking early about the small little things and feeling safe and empowered enough to be able to do so by listening to my story, seeing how openly I can talk about it, and then encouraging them through workshops and facilitation to actually talk about things that they might not have wanted to talk about. That's what police officers do all the time. We go into a situation and we convince people to do things that they don't want to do.
Right.
We you go into a house and you know that you're going to arrest this person, and you've got two choices. You either communicate really well with them and convince them that the best option for them at this time is to be arrested, or you don't communicate well and you end up having a big scrap with them, a big fight, because you're not communicating well. And so by me being able to encourage these people to communicate and show it's actually in your best interest to communicate, people do open up, they do express things that they wouldn't necessarily express. And so my workshops are very much around communication, but I know that you know this phrase, the thin blue line.
Yeah.
My workshops have a thin blue line of mental health running through it, because I think it was off air that we were talking just before about the stigmas around mental health and how in the UK, a lot of it is targeted at well-being. And well-being to me is such a feminine energy type of word. You know, to me, it evokes a very nurturing and caring and loving and soft and gentle.
Vulnerable.
Yeah. As a man, that is a complete turn off for me. I will switch off. And I think of things, when people talk about well-being and wellness, I think of incense and whale music and all that kind of stuff, you know?
Yes.
So
yes.
If I had two doors and I had to choose which room I was going to go into, and one of them said well-being and one of them said communication and resilience, I'd go into the communication and resilience one.
Right.
So it's not that I'm crowbarring mental health into it, but I'm just coming at it from a slightly more, not logical approach, but male-orientated approach, which, again, works better in a lot of businesses as well, to be fair.
Yeah.
Because they see well-being as either a tick box exercise or a nice extra to have if we've got a bit left over in the budget.
Right.
Whereas if you're actually going into them and going, listen, communication, problem solving, all of these things, they're going to benefit your business. They'll go, oh yeah, that's actually worth investing in, because we can see a tangible return that we would get from that.
What do you think your chances of success will be? Will you be able to move the needle?
If I can help one person, just one person, that is good enough for me. You can go to 100 jobs as a police officer and you help that one person. You catch that burglar in the house at the time. That makes up for the 99 other awful jobs that you've dealt with. So, yeah, I do want to move the needle and I do want to make change, but I'm not naive enough to think that I'm going to make a wholesale change across everything. Just the same as when I first joined the police. Oh, I'm going to change the world and I'm going to make the world a massive better place. You don't necessarily make a wholesale change, but I have changed people's lives. Mm-hmm. There's no two ways about it. I've saved people's lives. I've helped people. They will remember me. They might remember my face or whatever. So yeah, I do think I can move the needle if I can get people talking about things, and certainly police officers, because they're so bad at it a lot of the time.
Yes.
Honestly, there's such stigma around actually just talking and talking openly. We can talk about the blood, the guts and the gore, and we use gallows humor quite a lot, where it's very dark humor to try and deal with things and process things, which is great. But what about the other things that you tend not to talk about a lot that actually play on your mind.
It's easier to talk about other people's problems.
Yeah.
I find that even very young patrol officers are very good at solving other people's problems.
Yeah.
But they don't turn and use they don't apply that same logic and that same reasoning to themselves. And a lot of times they're in crisis at home, but they are very good at solving other people's crises.
Yeah. I read a book once called The Curse of the Strong, and it's about how you can focus a lot of your time and energy on helping other people to actually distract from your own demons and things that are going on in your head. And as police officers, we are problem solving every single day.
Yeah.
Day in, day out, different people, different problems, all this. And when do we actually problem solve our own problems? Get people coming in who are experienced police officers that have been there talking about what's affected them, because it gives it a bit more credence and a bit more validity of, oh, this person has actually been there, done that, knows what they're talking about, and has seen the impact. Okay, right, I'll listen to what they've got to say. We'll be more inclined to listen anyway.
Did you have chaplains, and did you know any of your chaplains? Did they know you by name?
No, we do have chaplains, and you might see the odd poster around a police station where these are the chaplains that work in these particular districts. But no, you wouldn't see them. They wouldn't know you.
Were there any other mental health professionals that had a relationship with you or the other people in your department before the crisis, or was it only after the fact?
It wasn't even after the fact a lot of the time. I'll be honest. Just before I left, they'd introduced something called TRIM, which was about trauma management. And so the call center would identify calls that were likely to be traumatic for the officers to deal with.
Okay.
A day or two later, you'd get an email asking if you're okay and you wanted help.
That's not much, but it's something. It's
something.
A little. Yeah.
But in and amongst all the other emails that you get and the workloads that you've got and all this, people don't have time for that. It needs to be a lot more almost invasive.
Well, that's actually a good word. As a patrol chaplain, that's what I'm doing. I go into the patrol stations in our city, and I go to the roll calls, the meetings at the beginning of their shift. I ride in the cars with them, and so I'm very much a part of the department, but I'm not a sworn officer. And so I've got 1 foot in and 1 foot out, and I've got about 125, 130 officers in the patrol divisions, and I know them all by name, and they know me. In fact, here in a couple hours, I've got a meeting with one of them doing premarital counseling before he gets married to his fiance. And so I have a relationship with these guys before there's a crisis. Now, when they have a crisis at home or at work, they may not choose to come to me, but at least they have the option of there's somebody who knows I've ridden in the car with them. I know the jargon and the lingo. I know, I know who their supervisors are. I've listened to them talk about their retirement, fund and their, the discipline somebody got because they got in trouble or whatever. I'm embedded and invasive. And so I'm there all the time, and I've had years of building rapport with them. And my plan is that there's going to be some officers that graduated from the academy maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, that their entire career, I will have been their chaplain, and I will always have been there from start to finish. And
I think that's fantastic. And
that's what we're trying to do more of. And most agencies in the United States don't have that.
And the thing is, you don't even have to be religious. I can't be. I can't. We have separation of church and state. There's no state religion, so I can't go in and invite them to my church, or I can't do that. But you don't. But you don't have to, because you're good at active listening, and so you're able to listen to them, empathize, ask questions, paraphrase some all these kind of little skills that you've got, and just by someone spending 10 minutes getting a little bit off the chest, it's a massive difference. That therapy session.
I listened to your story the first time on another podcast, and I heard you talking about the "Are you okay?" thing, and it brought tears to my eyes because that is my mission, is to reach out to these officers by going into the station or calling them or texting them or just running into them at the local supermarket and giving them that "Are you okay?" check-in when they weren't expecting it. And I don't know if I do that 1,000 times, I don't know if it ever made a difference, but it might have. You talking about that little old woman who was there and asked you if you're okay. I dearly hope that somehow, maybe someday after this life is over, I'll know if I made a difference. And I don't know if I have or not, but that's my goal. And so, so what you said really connected with me. And I feel like that's what you're doing now, is that you're showing people, especially these big, tough cops who are super compartmentalized and they consider themselves very resilient because they've stuffed everything down. You're showing them that it's okay to talk about the stuff that bothers them.
And the thing is as well, when you think about it practically, if you want to be the best police officer that you can possibly be, you've got to be head in the game, on the ball, good decision making, spot on. You're not going to be that person if you're thinking about the argument with your partner, or you're thinking about your money worries, or whatever it is. And because you don't talk about it, you get worse. It naturally happens that you get worse if you don't talk about it. And police officers have such a pride about not having taken a day off work. Oh, I've not had a day off work in 6 years. Aren't I good? Well, actually, no, because out of that 6 years, you've probably spent 18 months of it at 70%, 80% efficiency, if that. Whereas if you'd have had a few days off here and there for sick leave or because something's happened, you'd have actually returned to work at 100% a lot quicker, and you'd been a better officer. And I think that the stigmas and barriers around just talking about mental health needs to be broken down somehow. And for me, the easiest way of doing it is before it gets too bad, right at the start, over a coffee or a cup of tea if you're in England, get it done right at the start, where you just engage in simple conversation, because that will then grow and it will empower people to be able to talk about the little things, and the little things will lead to the bigger things, and the bigger things will lead to change.
I want to thank Ken for coming on the show, and I am so impressed with his commitment to helping other people. In fact, let me tell you a quick story. I was doing a follow-up with Ken after our interview, just checking on him, and as we're messaging back and forth, he asks me how I'm doing, and admittedly, I wasn't doing great. He could sense that. He probed a little bit, and he offered to get on the phone and call me right then. Now, time zone differences and meetings and such, I couldn't actually make that phone call, but the gesture to reach in, to use his phrase, and make sure that I was actually okay, that really moved me. Thank you, Ken. You're a good example to the rest of us. On the next episode of Hey, Chaplain.
If you join DEA, you're all in. You don't join DEA just because you're looking for just some job in federal law enforcement. You join DEA because you want to be at the tip of the spear for sort of rule of law, justice issues in the U.S. I mean, drug trafficking is a huge international issue. So you sort of have to be devoted to that, and you have to be devoted to that career and developing that career.
The views expressed here are the personal views of the host and our guests and do not necessarily represent the views of any law enforcement agency or its components. If you like this episode, please share it with a cop or someone who loves a cop. Thank you for listening to Hey Chaplain, and as always, pray for peace in our city.
Thank you so much for having me. I've genuinely enjoyed talking to you. It's been really enjoyable. Thank you.
What time in the evening is it over there?
9:10.
I just had lunch a little while ago.